In a single declaration, the world's fourth largest economy, worth $4.1 trillion in 2024, according to the IMF and the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, becomes the Republic of California. The Golden State, now richer than Japan, steps onto the stage as a nation of 40 million souls. Silicon Valley cheers, Wall Street freezes. But one question echoes louder than the anthem. Would California's debts vanish with its new flag? The shocking answer drawn from 2 centuries of law and finance is no. The debts would not dissolve. They would follow like a ghost that never dies. Because money, once promised, does not respect borders. It respects signatures. Here's what few secessionists ever say. Independence would instantly make California liable for a share of America's $34 trillion federal debt, roughly $4.3 trillion by population share. That's more than the entire GDP of Germany in 2022. Add to that California's own $80 billion in outstanding state bonds, unfunded pension obligations exceeding $1 trillion, and you get a new republic already born in the red. And yet, many dream otherwise. If we left, we'd thrive, activists argue, pointing to the state's economic dominance, clean tech exports, and Silicon Valley's cash hoards. They imagine freedom from Washington's grip, a fresh start, debt-free. But history doesn't forgive such fantasies. Every dollar California spends, every bond it issues, is woven into the fabric of the U.S. credit system, the same system that funds its highways, backs its banks, and underwrites its promise to pay tomorrow. To break away is to tear that web, strand by strand. To understand why, we need to go back in time to a war fought over secession, a courtroom decision written in ink and blood, and a forgotten clause that still chains California's gold to Washington's debt ledger. The year is 1868. The smoke of the Civil War still hangs over the continent when the U.S. Supreme Court delivers its verdict in Texas versus White. The message is final. The Union of the States is perpetual, wrote Chief Justice Salmon P. Chase. When Texas became one of the United States, she entered into an indissoluble relation. In that single line, the dream of secession died not by canon, but by contract. A contract written in debt. The Civil War had already proved that leaving the Union was more than rebellion. It was financial extinction. Confederate war bonds, once worth billions, turned to dust. Washington refused to honor them. Debt became the test of sovereignty. The Union's credit survived. The Confederacies vanished. When California joined the Union in 1850, it entered that same indissoluble bond. In exchange for federal recognition, it gained access to Washington's credit system, railroad loans, treasury guarantees, and military funding. By the late 1800s, California was issuing its own state bonds for canals and roads, backed by the same trust that powered the U.S. dollar. That trust still anchors every Californian paycheck, mortgage, and pension. Today, the state carries around $80 billion in general obligation bonds and over $1 trillion in pension liabilities, according to official budget reports. Every payment depends on one unspoken truth. Investors believe California is part of the United States. Yet in the 2010s, groups like Yes California and the California National Party revived the secession fantasy, arguing the state pays more than it gets, about $83 billion more in federal taxes than it receives. But that gap isn't oppression. It's leverage. Those dollars buy federal defense contracts, Social Security checks, and bond market credibility. By the 2020s, the paradox was clear. The richer California grew. The deeper it sank into the machinery of the Union. Independence wouldn't free it. It would strip away the system that made its wealth possible. And when that cord snaps, history doesn't repeat, it collects. In debt. The year is 2024. California overtakes Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy, its GDP climbing to $4.1 trillion, according to the IMF and the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. Governor Gavin Newsom declares victory. California isn't just keeping pace with the world, we're setting the pace. But beneath the celebration, a quieter storm brews. Online, the talk of Calexit resurfaces. We could be the next Germany, one post reads. We don't need Washington. And then comes the fatal question. What happens to the debt? Economists begin to calculate. The U.S. national debt has hit $34 trillion. By population share, roughly 12.7%, California's portion would equal about $4.3 trillion. That alone would make the new Republic of California one of the most indebted nations on Earth. And that's before adding the $80 billion in state bonds and $1.1 trillion in unfunded pensions already on Sacramento's books. Together, the total obligation approaches 5.5 trillion more than the GDP of Germany and greater than the entire national debt of the United Kingdom. But that's only the beginning. Nearly 45% of California's land belongs to the federal government. To become sovereign, it would have to buy back military bases, ports, national parks, and federal buildings from Camp Pendleton to NASA's Ames Research Center. Even a peaceful split would demand a colossal settlement, one that could drag on for decades, much like the post-Soviet debt negotiations of the 1990s. Then comes the question of currency. Would California keep the dollar or mint its own? History offers little comfort. When nations divide, like Czechoslovakia in 1993 or Yugoslavia in 1991, shared currencies collapse within months. Without the backing of Washington, a California dollar could plunge its credit rating, falling from AA to junk in weeks. Independence sounds like freedom. But in the language of finance, freedom without credit is bankruptcy. This is not a clash between red and blue. It is a collision between sovereignty and solvency. Every empire hides its true weapon. For the United States, that weapon isn't its army, it's credit. Beneath the surface of taxes and politics runs an invisible engine, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve. Together, they form the financial bloodstream of the nation. Every Californian mortgage, bond, and pension check flows through it. When California borrows, it borrows in dollars priced against U.S. Treasuries, the global benchmark for risk-free debt. Remove that anchor, and the entire structure of California's economy begins to shake. This system was forged long ago. In 1790, Alexander Hamilton bound the newborn republic together by federalizing the state's Revolutionary War debts. It was a radical act unity through obligation. The same pattern repeated in 1845 when Texas joined the Union and Washington absorbed its old debts. Credit became the glue that made the states inseparable. Now imagine reversing that equation. If California left, the logic flips. Washington would owe nothing. California would owe its share back roughly $4.3 trillion in federal debt. Because in finance, every exit has an invoice. Even if the new republic printed its own currency, its central bank would face the same brutal truth. No nation is independent without credibility. Rating agencies like S&P or Moody's would slash California from AA to BBB, or worse, treating it like an unstable emerging market. Investors would flee. Borrowing costs would soar. And then comes the currency trap. To keep prices stable, California would need foreign reserves, dollars, euros, gold. But those reserves belong to Washington. Without them, inflation would roar. Gas prices could double overnight. Tech giants like Apple, Google, and Nvidia might relocate to escape the turmoil. From the Confederacy in 1861 to the USSR's collapse in 1991, the rule never changes. Whoever loses control of credit loses the future. Because money isn't paper, it's permission. And that permission still flows from one source, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet in Washington, D.C. To secede from that isn't freedom. It's financial disarmament. California's dream of independence isn't new. It's the latest echo of an ancient illusion that a nation can leave an empire and drop its debts. History says otherwise. From the Confederacy in 1865, to Scotland in 2014, to Greece's Euro crisis and Brexit in 2020, every attempt to escape a financial system ends the same way. Reckoning. Debt isn't a chain, it's a web linking banks in San Francisco, pension funds in Kansas, traders in Tokyo, and credit desks in London. Sever it, and you lose more than money. You lose trust, the foundation of every economy. That trust lets California borrow billions cheaply, fixes mortgage rates to the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield, and keeps markets stable. Remove it, and chaos follows. California's power, innovation, wealth, global influence exists because of the union it dreams of leaving. Schools, banks, Silicon Valley investments all depend on faith in the U.S. dollar. If California walked away, it wouldn't be Washington that suffered first. It would be Californians' savings frozen, bonds sinking, prices soaring. Independence wouldn't erase debt, it would multiply it. Debt is more than money owed, it's a record of promises. And promises, unlike nations, do not secede.